A series of informal encounters between Patrice Allard, who's here, myself, Danny, Ricard Zapata, who's here somewhere, good morning, and Irena and Phil Wood, and talking to people at ICC to try to figure out if the Council of Europe program were to come to Montreal for a visit, what would the visit be about and what could we work on? And the idea that came out of those initial discussions was this idea of policy frameworks, not just indicators or the index, but the process of putting policy into place and how cities try to ensure that the policies that they put into place are congruent or coherent with local organization and practice. And so this idea of policy formation seemed to be something that was interesting to all of us, especially because here in Montreal, for a number of years, together with our colleagues at the Conseil interculturelle de Montréal, the Montreal Intercultural Council, we had started thinking about the question of policy frameworks and what would the city of Montreal need in order to have a clear framework so that different types of actors, excuse me, including everyday residents and citizens, would have a set of rules to play by, or at least some orientations. What's so interesting about Montreal is that there's 25, 30 years of programs and policies fighting discrimination, promoting diversity, talking about intercultural relations, but there's not a formal written statement about what interculturalism means. It's in the documentation. It seems to be something that's actually kind of in the water in Montreal for a long time. And so I think this is one of the things that was so attractive to us here in Montreal about collaborating with the Council of Europe, the ICC program, because although many of the programs in cities in the ICC program are younger in terms of the work they've been doing work for a shorter period of time, there's a more degree of formalization in terms of the policy frameworks. And so we thought, well, this would be something that we could work on because we have a lot of experience in Montreal, but the policy framework is still kind of flexible. And if the policy framework is not completely solidified, it's partially because Montreal takes its orders from the provincial level, which is Quebec, and yet in Canada, all we hear about is multiculturalism. Well, multiculturalism is not the policy here in Quebec, and that means it's not the policy here in Montreal. These different levels of political action are extremely important. We're going to talk about these levels during the breakout sessions. So the main objectives of the forum have to do with this initial idea that we thought it would be important to bring together practitioners and researchers, the practitioners and the theoreticians, together in the same context to see to what extent they can sit down around the same tables and talk about a common interest, especially this idea of looking at policy frameworks. And so but not policy frameworks in the kind of abstract sense, policy frameworks that are as much as possible integrated in terms of specific local environments. So first objective was to organize people around these three ideas, to mobilize knowledge around conditions, strategies, and principles. These three words are going to come up a lot during the workshop: conditions, strategies, and principles. What are the conditions, necessary conditions for making good policy? What are the strategies that different cities have used in their local contexts? And what are the principles that guide those strategies? Our second objective with the forum is to try to facilitate communication between different types of actors, and if it's possible, to move toward a kind of a comparative framework, comparative analysis, so we can look at different policies in different cities and see which elements they contain and which they don't, and which elements are important because of the local context. This is one of the projects that we're working on. And the other goal is to try to hammer out a series of common principles that cities anywhere could refer to when thinking about the idea of creating policy.